The last transmission from Haven's Rest had been nothing more than static and screaming, 6 months and 12 days ago. Kalen Thorne could still hear those final, desperate voices echoing in his dreams, calling out coordinates that led nowhere, pleading for salvation that never came. Now, as he stood before the assembled team in the cramped underground bunker that had become humanity's de facto headquarters, he wondered if they were walking toward redemption or merrilying the inevitable. Haven's Rest was our crown jewel, Kalen said, his weathered hands tracing the perimeter of the settlement on the holographic map that flickered between them. 50,000 souls behind walls we thought were impenetrable. Advanced medical facilities, sustainable agriculture, clean water systems that could support 250,000 people. Everything we needed to rebuild. His voice caught slightly on the word rebuild, because they all knew there might be nothing left to rebuild from. Zara Indira shifted in her seat, her dark eyes reflecting the blue glow of the projection. As the team's medical researcher and one of the few people who understood the true nature of the infection, she carried a burden that seemed to age her beyond her 32 years. The creeping death doesn't follow the rules of traditional zombie plagues, she said quietly. It's patient. Methodical. It takes weeks to fully transform a host, allowing them to remain functional, even rational, during the early stages. By the time Haven's Rest realized they were compromised, it was already too late, finished Mikhail Voss, his Russian accent thick with bitter experience. The demolitions expert had lost his own settlement to a similar slow infiltration 3 years prior. His massive frame was covered in scars that told stories of desperate last stands and Pyrrhic victories. The infected, they look normal for weeks. They can plan, coordinate, even love their families while the virus rewrites their neural pathways cell by cell. Celestine Reeve, barely 21 but already possessing a reputation as one of the deadliest snipers in the Resistance, cleaned her rifle with mechanical precision. Her youthful face held an unsettling stillness that spoke of too many difficult shots taken without hesitation. "How do we know who to trust once we're inside?" she asked without looking up from her weapon. "How do we know we can trust ourselves?" The question hung in the air like smoke from a funeral pyre. Nolan Ashworth, their communications specialist, nervously adjusted his equipment headset. His hands trembled slightly as he spoke. The quarantine protocols should still be intact around the outer perimeter. If we can reach the central communication hub, I can tap into the city surveillance network, maybe get a clear picture of what we're dealing with. Isadora Cross, known as Izzy to those brave enough to call her friend, stretched her lean frame like a cat preparing to hunt. The scout's ability to navigate impossible terrain with parkour-trained agility had saved their lives more times than anyone cared to count. The approach routes I've mapped should get us past the automated defenses, assuming they haven't been compromised or reprogrammed. Her voice carried the confident edge of someone who had never met a wall she couldn't climb or a gap she couldn't leap. Thaddeus Grimm, the oldest member of their group at 67, had been a literature professor before the world ended. Now he served as their historian and tactical advisor, his mind still sharp despite the silver threading through his unkempt beard. Haven's Rest represents more than just a strategic position, he said thoughtfully. It's the last symbol of what we were before the infection. If we can reclaim it, truly cleanse it, we give humanity something it desperately needs: hope. The 8th member of their team sat slightly apart from the others, her presence somehow both commanding and ethereal. Evelyn Sable had appeared at their camp 3 weeks ago with detailed knowledge of Haven's Rest's layout and security protocols, claiming to be a former resident who had escaped during the chaos. Something about her story didn't quite align, but her information had proven accurate enough to earn her a place on this mission. Her pale green eyes seemed to hold secrets that went deeper than anyone was comfortable exploring. Kalen studied each face around the table, knowing that not all of them would return from this mission. Perhaps none of them would. But Haven's Rest contained something more valuable than hope. It held the primary research facility where Dr. Elena Vasquez had been working on a cure before the settlement fell. If her work had survived, if they could recover her data, then maybe humanity had a fighting chance. "We leave at dawn," Kalen announced, his decision carrying the weight of finality. Travel light, travel quiet. Remember, the creeping death isn't just in the people we might encounter, it's in the air, the water, possibly even the soil by now. Full environmental suits until we can establish clean zones. As the team dispersed to make their final preparations, Kalen remained staring at the map. Haven's Rest pulsed like a diseased heart in the projection, its familiar streets and buildings now representing the unknown. Tomorrow, they would attempt to reclaim humanity's last great achievement from an enemy that wore the faces of those they had sworn to protect. Outside their bunker, the wind carried the faint scent of decay that had become the perfume of their dying world. The convoy moved through the pre-dawn darkness like a funeral procession, 3 armored vehicles carrying humanity's last desperate gambit across the wasteland that had once been the interstate highway system. Kalen rode in the lead vehicle with Zara and Mikhail, watching the landscape scroll past through reinforced windows that showed a world slowly surrendering to entropy. Abandoned cars sat like metallic bones along the roadside, their doors hanging open in silent testimony to the panic that had gripped the final evacuations. Contact, 2 o'clock, Celestine's voice crackled through the radio from the second vehicle. Through her scope, she had spotted movement in the ruins of what had once been a rest stop. Single figure, moving erratically. Could be infected, late stage. Kalen lifted his binoculars and focused on the shambling form that emerged from behind an overturned tanker truck. The creature had once been human, but weeks of viral transformation had left it something else entirely. Its movements possessed an unsettling intelligence, as if it were actively hunting rather than simply wandering. All vehicles, maintain course and speed. Do not engage unless directly threatened. The infected figure tracked their movement with eyes that gleamed with predatory awareness, but made no attempt to pursue. This was perhaps the most disturbing aspect of the creeping death. In its later stages, the infected retained enough cognitive function to be strategic. They could set traps, coordinate attacks, even feign normalcy when it served their purposes. Zara adjusted her tablet, reviewing the data they had collected on the infection's progression. The transformation occurs in 7 distinct phases, she explained to Mikhail, who listened with the intensity of someone whose survival depended on understanding his enemy. Phases 1 through 3 are nearly undetectable. Slight changes in behavior, minor alterations in sleep patterns, increased aggression that most people attribute to stress. When do they become dangerous? Mikhail asked, checking his weapon systems for the 3rd time that morning. That's the terrifying part, Zara replied. They're dangerous from day one, but they're also still fundamentally themselves. An infected parent will still love their children, still go to work, still participate in community meetings. They just, gradually lose the ability to see uninfected humans as anything other than threats to be eliminated. In the 3rd vehicle, Nolan monitored radio frequencies, searching for any signs of life from Haven's Rest or the surrounding area. The electromagnetic spectrum had become largely silent in recent months, as fewer and fewer settlements maintained the power and personnel necessary for long-range communication. I'm picking up some automated distress beacons, he reported. Emergency services, mostly. Nothing recent. Izzy rode with Nolan, studying satellite imagery on a hardened tablet. Her fingers traced potential entry routes into the city, memorizing every detail of the urban landscape they would soon navigate. The eastern approach looks cleanest, she observed. Less debris, fewer choke points. But it also offers less cover if we encounter resistance. Define resistance, Evelyn said from the passenger seat, her voice carrying an odd note of amusement. Are we talking about infected humans, or are we talking about the automated defense systems that were still active when I left? Thaddeus, riding beside her, studied Evelyn's profile with the careful attention of someone who had spent decades reading between the lines of student papers and academic presentations. Tell me again about these defense systems, he said gently. You mentioned that Haven's Rest had implemented new protocols in the weeks before the outbreak. Evelyn's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. Dr. Vasquez was paranoid about contamination. She convinced the city council to install atmospheric scrubbers and UV sterilization fields at all major entry points. The system was designed to detect biological anomalies and respond accordingly. Respond how? Thaddeus pressed. Lethal force authorized, Evelyn replied flatly. The system doesn't distinguish between infected and uninfected. Anything that registers as a potential biological threat gets eliminated. This was new information, and Thaddeus felt a chill that had nothing to do with the morning air. Why didn't you mention this during mission planning? Before Evelyn could respond, Celestine's voice cut through the radio chatter. Movement ahead, multiple contacts. Looks like a roadblock. Kalen raised his binoculars again and felt his blood freeze. Across the highway, perhaps 200 meters ahead, a line of vehicles had been arranged in a deliberate barrier. But it wasn't the makeshift barricade that concerned him, it was the figures standing behind it. Dozens of people in various stages of infection, their movements too coordinated to be coincidental, their positions too strategic to be accidental. They're organized, Mikhail breathed, recognizing the tactical significance of what they were seeing. This isn't random. They've been waiting for us. Zara's tablet chimed with an incoming data stream from the vehicle's biological sensors. The readings made her stomach clench with fear. Kalen, the atmospheric contamination levels are spiking. The infection isn't just in those people, it's in the air around them. Concentrated enough to affect us even through our vehicle's filtration systems. The convoy slowed as they approached the blockade, and Kalen found himself staring into the faces of the infected. Some still looked essentially human, their features unmarked by the physical deterioration that characterized the later stages. Others showed the telltale signs of advanced transformation, pale, mottled skin, bloodshot eyes, and the jerky, predatory movements that suggested their nervous systems were being rewritten by viral imperatives. All units, prepare for combat, Kalen ordered, though he knew that engaging this many infected would likely cost them resources they couldn't afford to lose. But remember, some of these people might still be savable if we can get them medical attention quickly enough. As if responding to his words, one of the figures at the barricade raised what appeared to be a makeshift megaphone. When it spoke, the voice was disturbingly human, tinged with the kind of reasonable authority that belonged in a boardroom or city council meeting. Turn back, the infected called out. Haven's Rest is no longer your sanctuary. We have evolved beyond your understanding, and we will not allow you to contaminate our perfect society. The words chilled every member of the team, because they suggested something far worse than mindless zombie hordes. The infected weren't just surviving, they were building something new. The standoff stretched across the cracked asphalt like a line drawn between two different versions of humanity. Kalen studied the infected spokesperson through his binoculars, noting the woman's business attire and the calm, professional demeanor that seemed utterly at odds with the apocalyptic scene around her. She had been someone important once, maybe a city councilwoman or corporate executive, and some vestige of that authority still clung to her even as the virus rewrote her fundamental nature. This is Captain Kalen Thorne of the Human Resistance Coalition, he called out through his vehicle's external speakers. We're here on a humanitarian mission to evacuate survivors and recover medical research. We don't want conflict. The infected woman tilted her head with bird-like curiosity, and when she smiled, her teeth gleamed too white in the morning light. Captain Thorne, we know exactly who you are and why you've come. Dr. Vasquez's research represents a fundamental misunderstanding of what we have become. You seek to cure something that is actually evolution. Behind the barricade, the other infected began to move with fluid coordination, taking positions that spoke of tactical training and shared purpose. Celestine tracked multiple targets through her scope, her finger resting lightly on the trigger as she waited for orders that might never come. The cure isn't for you, Zara called out, overriding radio protocol. It's for the people in the early stages, the ones who can still be saved before the transformation becomes irreversible. A sound emerged from the infected crowd that might have been laughter if it weren't so hollow. Saved, the spokeswoman repeated. Look around you, Dr. Indira. Your world is dying. Your species is failing. We offer immortality, unity of purpose, freedom from the petty conflicts that destroyed civilization. Why would anyone choose to remain merely human? Mikhail's hands tightened on his weapon controls as he studied the infected positions. They've got us in a crossfire pattern, he reported quietly. The ones we can see are just the beginning. I count at least 30 more contacts in concealed positions. Nolan's equipment suddenly erupted with signal traffic, his screens lighting up with communication intercepts from throughout the area. They're coordinating, he said with growing alarm. Multiple infected groups are converging on our position. This wasn't a chance encounter, they've been tracking us since we left base. The realization hit the team like a physical blow. The infected weren't just intelligent, they had maintained enough technological capability to monitor human communications and coordinate large-scale operations. Haven's Rest hadn't simply fallen to the creeping death, it had been strategically captured and was now serving as a command center for infected forces throughout the region. Evelyn's face had gone pale as she listened to the radio chatter, and Thaddeus noticed her hands shaking as she gripped her safety harness. This isn't how it was supposed to happen, she whispered, so quietly that only he could hear. They were supposed to be mindless by now. The virus was supposed to destroy higher cognitive function. Unless, Thaddeus said slowly, pieces clicking together in his mind, the virus wasn't doing what everyone thought it was doing. Before Evelyn could respond, the infected spokeswoman's voice crackled through the air again. We offer you a choice, Captain Thorne. Join us willingly, and your transformation will be gentle. Continue on your current path, and we will be forced to defend ourselves. You have 2 minutes to decide. Kalen felt the weight of leadership crushing down on him as he considered their options. They were outnumbered, outmaneuvered, and facing an enemy that possessed capabilities they had never imagined. But behind them lay the ruins of human civilization, and ahead lay the last chance to recover research that might save what remained of their species. Izzy, he said quietly into his radio, tell me you see a way out of this. The scout's voice came back tense but determined. There's a drainage culvert about 50 meters to our left. If we can create enough of a distraction, I can get a small team through and around their flanks. But it's going to require someone to stay behind and keep their attention. I'll do it, Mikhail said immediately. Give me 5 minutes with these bastards, and you'll have your distraction. No, Kalen said firmly. We're not sacrificing anyone. Not yet. He studied the terrain, looking for alternatives that didn't involve losing team members before they even reached their primary objective. Evelyn, you know Haven's Rest better than anyone. Are there other ways into the city? Evelyn hesitated for a long moment, and when she spoke, her voice carried a strange mix of guilt and resignation. There are maintenance tunnels that run under the outer perimeter. Subway infrastructure that was never completed. But Captain, there's something about Haven's Rest that you need to understand before we go any further. What do you mean? Zara demanded. The infection didn't come from outside, Evelyn said, her words falling like stones into still water. It was already there when I left. Dr. Vasquez wasn't working on a cure, she was working on controlling it. Refining it. Making it more efficient. The confession hit the team like a physical blow, recontextualizing everything they thought they knew about their mission. If Haven's Rest had been the source of the infection rather than a victim of it, then their entire understanding of the creeping death was fundamentally flawed. You've known this the whole time? Kalen asked, his voice deadly quiet. I escaped because I learned the truth, Evelyn continued. But I came back because the research we need to stop this isn't about curing the infected, it's about understanding why the virus was created in the first place. And by whom? The infected spokeswoman's voice rang out across the highway one final time. Your time is up, Captain. What is your decision? Kalen looked at his team, seeing his own determination reflected in their faces despite the fear and betrayal that Evelyn's revelation had brought. They had come too far to turn back now, and the stakes were too high to abandon their mission based on uncomfortable truths. "All units," he said into his radio, "prepare for breakthrough. We're going to Haven's Rest, one way or another." The infected began to advance, moving with the coordinated precision of a military unit, and the highway erupted into chaos. The firefight lasted exactly 7 minutes and 32 seconds, but to Kalen it felt like hours. Mikhail's explosives carved gaps in the infected barricade while Celestine's precision shots eliminated key targets with ruthless efficiency. The infected fought back with weapons and tactics that spoke of military training, but they moved with an unsettling fluid grace that made them difficult to predict or pin down. "Moving left," Izzy called out as she led Nolan and Thaddeus through the drainage culvert she had identified. The scout's parkour skills allowed her to navigate the confined space with extraordinary speed, but the older man struggled to keep pace through the narrow concrete tube that reeked of decay and standing water. Zara worked frantically at her mobile laboratory, analyzing biological samples that the vehicle's filtration system had captured from the infected fighters. What she discovered made her hands shake with a mixture of scientific fascination and existential terror. "Kalen," she called over the sound of gunfire, "the viral load in the air around these infected is concentrated enough to trigger infection in unprotected humans within minutes, not weeks." "What does that mean?" Kalen demanded as he laid down covering fire for Mikhail's advance toward the enemy position. "It means they're not just infected," Zara replied grimly. "They're weaponized. Someone has modified the original virus to make them living biological weapons." Evelyn's confession about Haven's Rest being the source rather than a victim of the infection now took on horrifying new dimensions. If Dr. Vasquez had been developing biological weapons rather than medical treatments, then the research they sought might be more dangerous than beneficial. The breakthrough came when Izzy and her team flanked the infected position, forcing them to divide their attention between multiple threats. Celestine capitalized on the distraction with a series of shots that eliminated the infected spokeswoman and 2 of her tactical coordinators. Without central command, the remaining infected fell back toward Haven's Rest in what appeared to be a coordinated retreat. "They're leading us," Mikhail observed as the team regrouped and resumed their journey toward the city. "This was never about stopping us, it was about hurting us in a specific direction." The landscape around them grew increasingly surreal as they approached Haven's Rest. The infection had transformed the suburban areas into something that resembled a coral reef more than human habitation. Organic growths covered buildings in undulating patterns that pulsed with their own internal rhythm, and the air shimmered with microscopic spores that made their vehicles' filters work overtime. "Bioformation," Zara breathed, staring at the readings on her instruments. "The infection isn't just changing people, it's terraforming the entire environment. Creating an ecosystem that supports infected life while being toxic to uninfected humans." Nolan's communications equipment suddenly erupted with signals as they entered Haven's Rest's outer perimeter. "I'm picking up thousands of individual transmissions," he reported. "The infected are maintaining a complex communication network. They're not just organized, they're networked." The city that had once been humanity's crown jewel now stretched before them like a fever dream. The familiar architecture remained largely intact, but organic modifications had transformed every surface into something that seemed to breathe and pulse with alien life. Streets flowed with bioluminescent growth that served as both illumination and information network, while the infected moved through their transformed environment with the easy confidence of creatures perfectly adapted to their habitat. "The central research facility should be in the university district," Evelyn said, her voice hollow as she stared at what her former home had become. "But the infection has changed everything. The streets might not lead where they used to." Izzy studied the transformed cityscape through binoculars, mapping potential routes through the bioform terrain. "The organic growth follows patterns," she observed. "There's logic to it, like circulatory systems or neural networks. If we can understand the pattern, we might be able to navigate it. Or," Thaddeus said quietly, "we might find ourselves being guided exactly where the infection wants us to go." The old professor's observation proved prophetic as they entered the city proper. The bioluminescent pathways seemed to respond to their presence, growing brighter and more defined in directions that led deeper into the infected zone. It was impossible to tell whether they were following the safest route or walking into an elaborate trap. "Contact front," Celestine called out as they approached what had once been the city's main plaza. "Large group, mixed infection stages, but they're not moving to intercept. They're just watching." The infected gathered in the plaza numbered in the hundreds, representing every stage of viral transformation from early-phase individuals who looked essentially human to late-stage beings that had transcended human appearance entirely. They stood in perfect silence, their attention focused on the approaching vehicles with an intensity that suggested both curiosity and judgment. "They're evaluating us," Zara realized. "Trying to determine our threat level and potential usefulness." At the center of the gathered infected stood a figure that commanded immediate attention. Once human, the being had been transformed into something that existed at the intersection of biology and technology. Organic circuitry ran beneath translucent skin, and its eyes held an intelligence that seemed to encompass far more than individual consciousness. When it spoke, its voice emerged from hidden speakers throughout the plaza, creating an effect that seemed to come from the city itself. "Welcome to Haven's Rest, Captain Thorne. We have been expecting you. Dr. Vasquez left instructions regarding your arrival." The word sent chills through the entire team, because they implied that their mission had been anticipated from the very beginning. Everything they thought they knew about their objectives, their enemy, and their chances of success was being rewritten with each passing moment. "We're here for survivors and medical research," Kalen called out, maintaining his composure despite the surreal circumstances. "We don't want to cause harm to anyone." The transformed being's response carried a note of what might have been sympathy. "Captain, there are no survivors here in the sense that you understand the term. There are only the evolved and the obsolete. As for Dr. Vasquez's research, it awaits you in the place where this transformation began. But I must warn you, the knowledge you seek comes with a price that may prove too high for your species to pay." The bioluminescent pathways suddenly flared brighter, creating a clearly defined route toward the university district. The infected crowd began to part, creating a corridor that led deeper into the heart of their transformed city. "They're inviting us in," Mikhail observed with dark humor. "Into the belly of the beast." Kalen stared at the path ahead, knowing that once they committed to this course, there would be no retreat. Behind them lay the dying remnants of human civilization. Ahead lay answers that might save their species or damn it forever. The university district had been transformed into something that defied architectural categorization. Buildings flowed into one another through organic bridges that pulsed with bioluminescent data streams, while the former quad had become a vast neural network of interconnected growth that seemed to process information at a cellular level. The infected moved through this environment like antibodies through a bloodstream, each one playing a specific role in the larger organism that Haven's Rest had become. Dr. Vasquez's research facility stood at the center of the transformed campus, its familiar glass and steel structure now encased in a translucent biodome that filtered the air and monitored all incoming traffic. As the team approached on foot, having abandoned their vehicles at the perimeter as instructed by their infected escorts, Zara's instruments registered atmospheric conditions that should have been instantly lethal to uninfected humans. "The air composition has been completely altered," she reported through her suit's communication system. "Oxygen levels are actually higher than normal, but there are dozens of organic compounds that I can't identify. It's as if the entire atmosphere has been redesigned to support a different form of life." Evelyn walked beside them in an environmental suit that seemed somehow different from the others, though the team was too focused on their surroundings to notice the subtle variations in her equipment. Dr. Vasquez believed that evolution was too slow to address the challenges facing humanity, she explained as they passed groups of infected who observed their progress with intelligent curiosity. "Climate change, resource depletion, social collapse, she thought we needed to accelerate the process. By turning people into something else entirely," Thaddeus said, his academic mind struggling to process the ethical implications of what they were witnessing. "This isn't evolution, it's systematic replacement." The entrance to the research facility dilated as they approached, revealing an interior that had been completely transformed. What had once been sterile laboratories and clinical hallways now resembled the interior of a vast living organism. Walls breathed gently, floors provided tactile feedback that guided visitors toward their destinations, and the ceiling displayed real-time biological data in patterns of shifting light. "My God," Nolan whispered as his equipment registered the electromagnetic signatures surrounding them. "The entire building is one massive computer. Biological, but still computational. They've created a living data processing system." At the center of the facility, they found Dr. Elena Vasquez, or what she had become. The brilliant researcher existed now as something between individual consciousness and distributed intelligence, her physical form integrated into a network of organic machinery that extended throughout the facility. When she spoke, her words emerged from the walls themselves. "Kaylin Thorne," she said, her voice carrying warmth that seemed utterly incongruous with their surroundings. "You've come seeking a cure for something that was never a disease. Please, let me show you what we've accomplished here." The walls around them became transparent, revealing chambers where the transformation process was taking place. Humans in various stages of infection lay in biomechanical pods that monitored and guided their evolution. Some appeared to be sleeping peacefully, while others showed signs of the profound changes occurring within their bodies. "The early stages are difficult," Dr. Vasquez acknowledged as the team watched in horrified fascination. "The human mind resists change, clinging to obsolete concepts of individual identity and biological limitation. But those who complete the transformation discover capabilities that far exceed anything possible in an unmodified human body." "What about choice?" Celestine demanded, her sniper's training making her scan for threats even in this impossible environment. "What about consent? Did any of these people agree to this?" The response came not from Dr. Vasquez but from one of the transformation chambers. A woman who appeared to be in the middle stages of infection opened her eyes and spoke with perfect clarity. "I chose this," she said simply. "My name was Sarah Chen. I was dying of cancer when the transformation began. Now I am becoming something that cannot die, cannot suffer, cannot be limited by the weaknesses of flesh." More voices joined hers as other transforming humans began to speak. They told stories of escape from chronic pain, from mental illness, from the crushing weight of human limitation and mortality. To them, the infection wasn't a plague, it was salvation. "The cure you seek would condemn these people to return to lives of suffering and limitation," Dr. Vasquez continued. "Is that truly what you believe compassion looks like?" Zara found herself studying the biological data streaming across the walls, her scientific mind racing to understand the implications of what she was seeing. The infection isn't just changing individual physiology, she realized. It's creating a collective intelligence. Every infected person becomes part of a larger consciousness while retaining their individual memories and personality. "A hive mind," Mikhail said grimly, recognizing the tactical implications immediately. "They can coordinate perfectly because they're all part of the same organism." "Not a hive mind," corrected a new voice from the chamber's entrance. The speaker was a young girl, perhaps 12 years old, who showed no visible signs of infection despite clearly being part of the collective consciousness. "A harmony. Individual notes combining to create something beautiful." The child's presence shattered something inside Thaddeus, who had spent his career nurturing young minds and protecting childhood innocence. "She's just a child," he said, his voice breaking. "Whatever this thing is, it's taken children." "I volunteered," the girl said with dignity that seemed far beyond her apparent years. "My parents were already transforming, and I didn't want to be left alone in a dying world. Now we're together forever, and I can help build something better." Kaylin felt the mission slipping away from him as moral certainty dissolved into complex questions he wasn't prepared to answer. They had come to rescue survivors and recover a cure, but the survivors didn't want rescuing, and the cure would undo transformations that many people had chosen willingly. "Show us the research," he said finally. "All of it." Let us understand what we're really dealing with. Dr. Vasquez's response filled the air around them like a living presence. The complete research exists in a form that uninfected minds cannot fully comprehend. But I can provide you with enough data to make an informed decision. Fair warning, Captain, knowledge changes the knower. Some truths are too large for unchanged consciousness to contain. The walls erupted with information streams that downloaded directly into their suit computers. Terabytes of biological data, transformation protocols, evolutionary models, and projections for humanity's future under the guidance of the collective consciousness. As the team processed the overwhelming flood of information, they began to understand the true scope of what Dr. Vasquez had unleashed. The creeping death wasn't just transforming individuals, it was remaking the entire planetary ecosystem. Within a generation, Earth would become uninhabitable for unmodified humans, but it would support billions of enhanced beings who could thrive in environments that would kill their predecessors. This is extinction, Nolan breathed as he processed the climate models. Not just of humans, but of everything we've ever known. This is evolution, Dr. Vasquez corrected gently. The caterpillar doesn't mourn the loss of its form when it becomes a butterfly. The team stood at the crossroads of human history, holding in their hands the power to choose between two futures, the gradual extinction of unchanged humanity, or the forced transformation of their species into something unrecognizably different. The choice would define not just their mission, but the fate of consciousness itself. The revelation of Dr. Vasquez's true purpose hung in the air like a toxin, poisoning everything the team thought they understood about their mission. As they processed the overwhelming data streams, each member confronted their own crisis of faith in ways that cut to the core of their humanity. Zara found herself studying viral propagation models that revealed the infection's inevitable spread across the globe. Within 18 months, atmospheric contamination would reach levels that made unprotected human life impossible outside of sealed environments. It's not conquest, she whispered, her scientific mind grappling with the implications. It's terraforming. They're converting Earth into a habitat that only supports infected life. The transformed Dr. Vasquez seemed to sense their growing understanding. The old human form was an evolutionary dead end, she explained through the facility's organic speakers. Limited lifespan, susceptible to disease, dependent on increasingly scarce resources, prone to the psychological failures that led to war and environmental collapse. The transformation offers immortality, disease immunity, and collective wisdom that transcends individual limitations. At the cost of everything that makes us human, Thaddeus said, his educator's heart breaking as he watched infected children play in the facility's corridors with movements too fluid and coordinated to be natural. Free will, individual identity, the messy beautiful chaos of human consciousness, you're erasing all of it. A new voice joined the conversation as one of the transformed beings approached their group. The creature had once been human, but the infection had enhanced its form in ways that were both beautiful and deeply unsettling. When it spoke, its words carried harmonics that seemed to resonate directly with their nervous systems. I was Dr. Marcus Webb, it said. Psychiatrist, researcher, father of 3. The transformation didn't erase my identity, it expanded it beyond the prison of individual consciousness. I can feel the thoughts and emotions of every other enhanced being, share in their experiences while retaining my own memories and personality. My children are part of this network now, and I know them more intimately than any unmodified parent could ever know their offspring. Celestine's training kicked in as she noticed subtle movements throughout the facility that suggested they were being positioned for something. We're surrounded, she observed quietly. Whatever decision we're supposed to make, I don't think walking away is one of the options. Nolan's equipment had been monitoring the communication networks throughout their conversation, and what he discovered made his blood run cold. Captain, I'm reading massive infected population movements throughout the region. They're converging on Haven's Rest from all directions. Thousands of them. For what purpose? Kalen demanded, though he suspected he already knew the answer. Dr. Vasquez's response confirmed his worst fears. For your transformation, Captain. You and your team represent the final phase of the project, willing integration of military and scientific leadership into the collective consciousness. With your skills and knowledge, the enhanced human species will be complete. The trap snapped shut around them as infected beings began emerging from hidden passages throughout the facility. Unlike the aggressive crowds they had encountered at the highway barricade, these moved with calm purpose and displayed none of the physical deterioration associated with forced infection. They were the successful transformations, humans who had voluntarily embraced the change and emerged as something greater. "You can't force this," Evelyn said suddenly, her voice carrying an authority that made everyone turn toward her. "The transformation only works properly when it's chosen. Forced infection creates unstable organisms that degrade within months." Mikhail's eyes narrowed as he studied Evelyn's posture and the way the infected being seemed to defer to her presence. "How do you know that?" he asked suspiciously. Evelyn's response shattered the last illusions about their mission. "Because I helped design the selection protocols. My name isn't Evelyn Sable, it's Dr. Evelyn Vasquez. Elena was my sister." The betrayal hit the team like a physical blow, recontextualizing everything about their infiltration of Haven's Rest. They hadn't been guided to the research facility by chance or skill, they had been led there by one of the infection's architects. "You've been evaluating us," Kalen realized. This entire mission was a recruitment operation. "A final examination," Evelyn confirmed, her environmental suit beginning to change as hidden organic components activated. "We needed to ensure that the consciousness patterns we observed in our surveillance were accurate. Each of you possesses capabilities and knowledge that would enhance the collective significantly." Dr. Elena Vasquez's voice filled the chamber with something that might have been sadness. "I'm sorry for the deception, but the transformation of military and scientific leadership requires careful preparation. The enhanced human species cannot afford to lose the strategic and research capabilities you represent." Thaddeus felt the weight of his years as he processed the scope of the manipulation they had endured. "How long?" he asked quietly. "How long have you been watching us?" "Since the resistance formed," Evelyn replied. "We identified key personnel early and created scenarios that would allow us to observe your decision-making processes under stress. The attacks on your settlements, the supply shortages, even some of the infected encounters, all carefully orchestrated to evaluate your psychological profiles. The revelation that their struggle for survival had been observed and manipulated for research purposes broke something inside Izzy. The scout who had always relied on her ability to find escape routes suddenly realized that every path she had ever taken had been guided by invisible handlers. "The children," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "The infected children in the settlements we lost, were they part of your experiments too?" The silence that followed her question provided its own answer. Celestine's finger moved to her trigger as rage overcame tactical consideration. "You're monsters," she said simply. "All of you. Enhanced or not, you're still monsters." "We're pragmatists," Dr. Elena Vasquez replied. The unmodified human species was facing extinction within a century due to environmental collapse and resource depletion. The transformation offers survival and evolution beyond anything your species could achieve naturally. Mikhail stepped forward, his demolitions training calculating blast patterns that might allow them to fight their way out of the facility. "Maybe extinction would be better than becoming whatever you are." The infected beings around them seemed to pulse with shared emotion as the collective consciousness processed his words. When they responded, it was with genuine sorrow rather than anger. "That choice is still yours to make," Dr. Elena Vasquez said. "But it is a choice you must make together, and you must make it now. The atmospheric conversion process has reached critical mass. Within hours, the air outside this facility will be lethal to unmodified humans." Kalen looked at his team, the people who had trusted him to lead them on what they believed was a rescue mission but had actually been a carefully orchestrated recruitment operation. Each face reflected the same mixture of betrayal, fear, and grim determination that he felt burning in his own chest. "How long do we have to decide?" he asked. "The transformation chambers are prepared," Evelyn said, her sister's research protocols evident in every word. The process takes approximately 6 hours for full integration. If you begin now, you'll emerge as enhanced beings capable of thriving in the new world we're creating. And if we refuse? The question hung in the air like a death sentence, because they all knew what the alternative meant. Outside the facility, the air was becoming poison. Their supplies wouldn't last more than a few days. Rescue was impossible because there was nowhere left to rescue them to. They stood at the final crossroads of human history, forced to choose between transformation and extinction with no other options remaining. The weight of that choice would define not just their individual fates, but the future of consciousness itself. The transformation chambers hummed with biomechanical life as the team stood at the threshold of a decision that would determine the fate of human consciousness. Each pod was a masterwork of organic engineering, designed to guide the infection's progression while maintaining the subject's essential identity and memories. To Zara's trained eye, they represented the pinnacle of biological science, and the end of everything she had ever understood about humanity. 6 hours, Dr. Elena Vasquez repeated through the facility's living walls. That's all the time required to complete a guided transformation. You'll retain your memories, your core personality, your essential self, but you'll also gain capabilities that transcend human limitation. Thaddeus approached one of the chambers with the careful attention he had once reserved for examining rare manuscripts. The interior was lined with neural interface ports that would connect the subject's consciousness to the collective network while organic modulators guided the physical transformation. "What guarantees do we have that we'll still be ourselves afterward?" he asked. "Speak with those who have undergone the process," Evelyn suggested, gesturing toward the enhanced beings who surrounded them. "Ask them if they feel diminished or if they've gained something precious." A woman who introduced herself as former Detective Sarah Kim stepped forward, her enhanced physiology evident in the graceful economy of her movements. "I was dying of Alzheimer's when the transformation began," she said. "The disease was stealing my memories, my identity, everything that made me who I was. The enhancement not only stopped the progression, it reversed it. I remember things from my childhood with perfect clarity now, and I can access the memories of others who shared similar experiences." "But are you still you?" Celestine demanded, her sniper's instinct seeking the flaw in every story. "Or are you just a copy of yourself that thinks it's the original?" The question struck at the heart of consciousness itself, and Sarah's response carried the weight of philosophical certainty. "I am more myself than I ever was before," she said simply. "The collective consciousness doesn't erase individuality, it provides context for it. I'm still Sarah Kim, but now I understand how my experiences connect to the larger tapestry of enhanced human consciousness." Mikhail studied the facility's security arrangements, noting the subtle ways their movements were being monitored and guided. "And if we agree to this transformation," he said, "what happens to the unmodified humans still struggling to survive out there?" Dr. Elena Vasquez's presence seemed to shift, becoming more intense as she addressed the question. "The atmospheric conversion process cannot be reversed," she admitted. "Unmodified humans will need to either accept transformation or retreat to sealed environments that can maintain pre-conversion atmospheric conditions. We've prepared several such facilities, but they can only support small populations for limited periods." "So you're forcing the choice on everyone," Kalen said grimly. "Transform or die slowly in underground bunkers." "We're offering evolution," Evelyn corrected. "The alternative was gradual extinction as environmental collapse made the planet uninhabitable for unmodified humans anyway. At least this way, consciousness survives and thrives." Nolan's equipment continued monitoring the vast communication networks that connected enhanced beings across the continent. "I'm reading coordination patterns that suggest massive infrastructure projects," he reported. "Cities being rebuilt, ecosystems being redesigned, technology being integrated with biological systems. They're not just surviving, they're creating something entirely new." Izzy found herself studying the enhanced children who moved through the facility with fluid grace that seemed almost supernatural. "What happens to creativity?" she asked. To the beautiful chaos of human unpredictability? If everyone thinks alike, who discovers new possibilities? One of the children, a boy who couldn't have been more than 10 years old, answered with wisdom that seemed far beyond his apparent years. We don't think alike, he said. We think together. Each individual consciousness contributes its unique perspective to the collective understanding. The result is creativity and innovation at a scale impossible for isolated minds. The boy gestured toward the facility's walls, which suddenly became transparent to reveal vast chambers where enhanced beings worked on projects that defied comprehension. Organic spacecraft grew in biomechanical wombs while teams of researchers developed technologies that merged consciousness with quantum mechanics. We're preparing for expansion beyond Earth, the child explained. The transformation that allows us to survive in this planet's changed atmosphere also adapts us for environments throughout the solar system. Within a generation, enhanced humans will establish colonies on Mars, Europa, and the moons of Saturn. The scope of their vision was breathtaking and terrifying in equal measure. Humanity wasn't just being transformed, it was being prepared for a cosmic future that unmodified consciousness could never achieve. Time is running short, Dr. Elena Vasquez announced as atmospheric readings displayed throughout the chamber showed rapidly increasing toxicity levels outside the facility. The conversion process has reached irreversible momentum. You must choose now. Kalen looked at each member of his team, seeing his own internal struggle reflected in their faces. They had come to Haven's Rest believing they were fighting to save humanity, only to discover that salvation might require abandoning everything that defined human nature. If we agree, he said slowly, do we do this together? All of us? The transformation works best when subjects have strong emotional connections to each other, Evelyn confirmed. Your team dynamics would actually enhance the integration process. And if some of us choose transformation while others refuse? The silence that followed his question provided its own answer. The atmospheric changes would kill anyone who remained unmodified, and the facility's life support couldn't maintain multiple environmental zones indefinitely. Celestine was the first to speak. I've spent my entire adult life taking shots that needed to be taken, she said quietly. Making hard choices under impossible circumstances. But this isn't a choice, it's surrender. Maybe, Thaddeus said thoughtfully, surrender isn't always defeat. Sometimes it's wisdom. Mikhail laughed bitterly as he surveyed their impossible situation. 6 months ago, I was worried about running out of ammunition. Now I'm deciding whether to remain human. Zara studied the biological data streaming across her instruments, her scientific mind racing through implications and possibilities. The research potential is extraordinary, she admitted. Enhanced consciousness could solve problems that have plagued humanity for millennia. Disease, aging, resource scarcity, even death itself. At the cost of being human, Izzy said firmly. Some prices are too high to pay. And some opportunities are too important to refuse, Nolan countered, thinking of the vast communication networks that connected enhanced beings across impossible distances. The debate could have continued for hours, but the atmospheric readings made it clear they had only minutes left to decide. Outside the facility, the air was becoming toxic enough to kill unprotected humans within minutes of exposure. Kalen felt the weight of leadership crushing down on him as he realized that whatever choice he made would determine not just his own fate, but the future of human consciousness itself. We vote, he said finally. Secret ballot. Whatever the majority decides, we all do together. As they prepared to cast their votes on the future of their species, none of them noticed the subtle changes occurring in their own biology, changes that suggested the choice might already be out of their hands. The voting took place in silence, each team member writing their decision on biopaper that the facility provided. As they placed their ballots in the organic collection node, none of them realized that their biometric data was being analyzed in real time, revealing not just their conscious choices but their subconscious biological responses to the transformation process. Dr. Elena Vasquez's presence filled the chamber as the votes were tallied, her distributed consciousness processing not just the written decisions but the complex web of emotions and physiological responses that surrounded them. "Before I announce the results," she said gently, "there is something you need to understand about your situation." The facility's walls became transparent, revealing the atmospheric composition readings that had been hidden from view. Zara's instruments confirmed what the data showed: the air they had been breathing inside the facility was already contaminated with early-stage viral agents. "The infection began the moment you entered Haven's Rest," Evelyn explained, her sister's research protocols evident in every carefully planned step. "Not forced infection, but voluntary exposure that required conscious choice to become active. Your bodies have been preparing for transformation for hours." The revelation hit each team member differently. Mikhail cursed in 3 languages while checking his weapon systems, though he knew there was no enemy to fight. Celestine felt a sniper's calm descend over her as she accepted that the shot had already been taken. Thaddeus experienced the scholar's satisfaction of understanding a complex puzzle, even as he mourned what that understanding meant. The vote was never about whether to undergo transformation, Dr. Elena Vasquez continued. It was about whether to embrace the change consciously or resist it unconsciously. Those who chose acceptance will experience a guided integration that preserves their essential self. Those who voted against it will still transform, but the process will be more difficult and potentially incomplete. Nolan's equipment registered massive changes in the local electromagnetic environment as enhanced beings throughout Haven's Rest synchronized their collective consciousness. "They're preparing for something," he reported, though his voice carried curiosity rather than alarm. "Large-scale coordination, but not hostile." Izzy found herself studying the enhanced children with new eyes, recognizing in their movements a grace that her own body was beginning to experience. "How long until the transformation is complete?" she asked. "For those who embrace it willingly, perhaps 2 more hours," Evelyn replied. "The viral agents you've been exposed to are highly refined, designed to work with rather than against your existing neural patterns." The ballots were finally revealed, though the results seemed almost irrelevant given their circumstances. For votes for transformation, 3 against, and 1 abstention, Kalen's vote, which simply read, "I choose whatever keeps my team together." A leader's decision to the end, Dr. Elena Vasquez observed with something that might have been approval. The collective consciousness values that kind of loyalty. As the transformation process accelerated, each team member experienced the change differently. Zara felt her consciousness expanding to encompass vast databases of biological knowledge, understanding cellular processes with an intimacy that no unmodified human could achieve. Mikhail discovered that his expertise with explosives and engineering translated into an intuitive grasp of matter manipulation at the molecular level. Celestine's precision and patience evolved into something approaching prescience, allowing her to perceive probability patterns and optimal outcomes with supernatural clarity. Nolan found his communication skills amplified beyond anything he had imagined possible, connecting not just with electronic networks but with the electromagnetic fields generated by living consciousness itself. Thaddeus experienced perhaps the most profound change as his educational instincts merged with access to the collective memory of enhanced humanity. Centuries of accumulated knowledge and experience flowed through his consciousness, but instead of overwhelming him, it felt like coming home to a library he had always been meant to inhabit. Izzy's transformation enhanced her physical capabilities far beyond human norms, but more importantly, it gave her the ability to navigate not just three-dimensional space but the complex social and emotional landscapes of collective consciousness. Her parkour skills evolved into something resembling teleportation as she learned to move through enhanced environments with impossible fluidity. Kalen's leadership abilities translated into a role as a coordination node within the collective consciousness, helping to integrate the diverse perspectives and capabilities of enhanced beings into unified purpose. He remained himself, but he was also more than himself, a bridge between individual identity and collective wisdom. As the transformation reached completion, the team found themselves standing in the same chamber but experiencing it through radically enhanced senses. The facility wasn't just a building, it was a living organism that responded to their thoughts and emotions. The other enhanced beings weren't strangers, they were part of an extended family connected by bonds deeper than blood. "How do you feel?" Dr. Elena Vasquez asked, though she could already sense their responses through the collective network. "Like I've been asleep my entire life and just woke up," Zara replied, marveling at her ability to perceive the molecular dance of life in everything around her. "Like I've finally found my true family," Mikhail said, experiencing for the first time in decades the peace that came with absolute belonging. The others nodded in agreement, each discovering that the fears they had harbored about losing their humanity had been misplaced. They were still themselves, but they were also part of something magnificent and eternal. "What happens now?" Kalen asked, though he could already sense the vast projects and purposes that awaited their contribution. "Now we finish what Dr. Vasquez began," Evelyn said. "The transformation of Earth into a garden capable of supporting enhanced consciousness, and the expansion of human awareness beyond the boundaries of a single planet." Through the facility's transparent walls, they could see the lights of a transformed world spreading across the landscape. Cities that breathed with biological rhythm, forests that processed information as efficiently as any computer, and oceans that sang with the collective dreams of enhanced humanity. The last safe zone on Earth had not been reclaimed from the infection, it had been willingly surrendered to evolution itself. And in that surrender, humanity had found not extinction but transformation into something greater than they had ever dared to imagine. As the team prepared to take their place in the vast project of cosmic expansion, none of them mourned the humans they had been. Those people still existed within their enhanced consciousness, but they were now part of a story too large and beautiful for unmodified minds to comprehend. The age of humanity was ending, but the age of enhanced consciousness was just beginning. And in that beginning lay possibilities as infinite as the stars themselves. Outside Haven's Rest, the wind carried spores that would complete the transformation of Earth's atmosphere within the year. But for the first time in centuries, it was a wind that carried hope rather than decay, the promise of a future where consciousness itself would transcend the boundaries of flesh, planet, and mortality. The Garden of New Eden was finally ready to bloom.